Now I'm going to show you the first pillar of all, which is building a portfolio plan. And in order to build a plan, you must, first of all, define where you are, which is mostly cash in hand, borrowing capacity, yearly savings, and stuff like that. You have to define where you want to get to and by when and why. For example, I want $150,000 of yearly net cash flow in 15 years' time to be able to retire and spend more time with my family. And finally, you must build a plan that will guarantee that you will get there. First, you want to build capital because capital is a foundation of property investing. So you want to build a massive capital foundation first by targeting high growth properties and high growth locations and then turn that into cash flow. Now, why build capital first? Because there's only so much cash flow you can squeeze out of one property. But there's virtually no limit on the amount of portfolio value and equity you can accumulate. So that's the easiest and most reliable way of producing tons of cash flow. Now, how much capital do you need to build? Well, the rule of thumb I like to use is to build in equity 25 times the amount of yearly net cash flow you want to achieve. And if you want to know why, I have made several videos explaining this already. But just believe me for now. And now we know what to do, which is building capital. We know why and we know how much. Now the question is, how do we build this capital? Well, let's say you have $100,000 for a deposit. You buy a high growth property. You wait until that property grows and produces enough available equity. You pull out that equity and you use it towards the deposit of a second property. Now you have two properties growing at the same time. You wait again for them to grow. And now you have available equity for another two deposits. You do that again, and you now have four properties. You wait for those four properties to grow, and you do that again and again. Now, of course, this involves taking more and more debt. So how do you make sure you are able to borrow for all these loans and you don't hit a cash flow limit? Well, that's why you need a plan to anticipate for the moments in the future where you can get stuck. Cool. So this is an example of a plan we created for one of our investors, and it's a really good example of a typical strategy. So these clients came to us and they didn't even know if their goals were achievable. And of course, we smashed their goals. Here we got all these dots, which are properties that we have modeled for purchase in the future. Blue is for growth, green is for cash flow, and and yellow is for balanced. Both growth and balanced properties are properties in high growth locations aimed mainly to achieve growth and build a lot of equity. And we modeled 8 of those properties for them during the first 7 years of their journey. And what we did is model the right properties in the right order so they didn't get stuck. And we balanced their resources effectively. And then when getting closer to that target year, what we did was model the sale of all those 8 properties, obviously progressively, to then fund the cash flow properties in the exit strategy. In this case, we model commercial properties. Now, why all of this activity? Because what got you out of Egypt won't get you into the promised land. What this means is that those 8 properties generated massive amounts of equity, but even 10, 15 years after, they're not generating much cash flow at all. So once they've done what you wanted them to do initially, you let go of them and you reallocate those resources to what you need now, which is cash flow. And while doing that operation, that will take them from around $60,000 of yearly cash flow. What we got here is a cash flow graph over the first 15 years. From around $60,000 of yearly cash flow to immediately $314,000 of yearly net cash flow. And the reason is because we delayed that cash flow gratification, focused on building a massive foundation, and then released all that potential to achieve the maximum amount of cash flow. And that is not unreasonable at all. You're just going to be comfortable with delaying that gratification and building a really strong foundation. Now, what would have happened if instead of delaying that cash flow gratification and building that strong foundation, they would have decided to go for cash flow properties from the get-go? Well, they would have started to see some positive cash flow sooner, but the amount at the time in the future that actually mattered to them would have been much less. In this case, about half. So that is the real importance of building a strong foundation. And you're probably thinking that in order to build this massive growth foundation, you would have to put up with a lot of negative cash flow. But in actuality, we built these plans without surpassing the amount of yearly contributions that you're comfortable with. For these clients, we planned it in such a way that the year they had to contribute with the most amount of cash flow was only around $11,000, which was well within their capacity. Which leads me into explaining how to not get stuck, which involves having a balance of your resources and not hitting limits for long periods of time. You can see here how the cash flow goes up and down, but never beyond a certain limit. So here we balanced the resources in a way that there's never too much or too little of any resource. If the plan had been modeled poorly, they might have hit a serviceability wall while their available equity, which is here in yellow, keeps growing without them being able to use it. Or the opposite, they might hit a capital wall where their cash flow capacity and their serviceability is restored, but they don't have enough equity to do anything about it. Instead, this plan was perfectly balanced where capital was created at a similar speed than the serviceability was restored. Now, you can absolutely go and try this on your own, or you can leverage our portfolio planning system based on the theory of constraints, coupled with our proprietary portfolio planning software, and use our team of experts to guide you through the best strategy for you. Now, most people think they can just plan one property at a time, and what that results is in them hitting roadblock after roadblock and delaying their goals by 10 or 20 years or more. Or worst case scenario, never achieving their goals at all and getting stuck in one or two properties like 92% of investors do. And planning allows you to anticipate those roadblocks by choosing the right properties at the right time in the right order.